One moment of cruelty, one torn dress, $1 billion lost. When Marcus Chen walked into that glittering ballroom, he had no idea his wife was being humiliated just floors below. Eleanor Whitmore didn't know the quiet woman she'd just degraded in front of 50 guests was married to the man about to save her family's empire. And Sarah? Sarah stood there in her torn uniform, wine-stained and trembling, knowing that silence was sometimes the most powerful response of all. What happened next would shake the foundations of New York's elite and expose the ugly truth hiding behind champagne toasts and million-dollar smiles. This is a story about dignity, consequence, and the price of prejudice.
Sarah Chen had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill. At 32 years old, she'd perfected the art of moving through rooms without being seen, refilling champagne glasses, clearing plates, straightening tablecloths, all while the wealthy talked through her as if she were furniture. She'd been working as an event server for Premier Catering for 3 years now, picking up shifts that fit around her graduate studies in social work at Columbia. Most people who saw her in the crisp black uniform and white apron assumed this was all she was. They didn't know about the scholarship. They didn't know about her volunteer work at the youth center in Harlem. They certainly didn't know about Marcus. Her husband was her secret source of strength, though he'd become someone she barely recognized in photographs. The tech entrepreneur whose AI platform had just revolutionized data security. The man Forbes called the silent disruptor. The billionaire who still preferred cooking dinner at home to eating at Michelin-starred restaurants. Marcus was in Tokyo closing a deal. Sarah was at the Whitmore estate in the Hamptons, serving canapés to people who'd never spoken her name. She preferred it that way. The Whitmore mansion was everything you'd expect from old money trying desperately to look relevant. Modern art on classical walls, a DJ booth in a ballroom built in 1887, influencers taking selfies beneath crystal chandeliers that had survived 2 world wars. Tonight's party celebrated Eleanor Whitmore's 40th birthday, though everyone knew it was really about saving face. The Whitmore Group was bleeding money. Textiles, their legacy industry, was dying. Their real estate portfolio was over-leveraged. Eleanor's father, Richard Whitmore III, was 3 months from losing everything unless they secured the Chen Technologies contract, a $1.2 billion infrastructure deal that would modernize their supply chain and give them a lifeline into Asian markets. Sarah knew this because Marcus had been talking about the Whitmore deal for months, weighing the ethics of saving a company with a problematic history. The Whitmores had built their fortune on cotton plantations before the Civil War, had opposed integration, had a documented record of housing discrimination lawsuits in the 80s and 90s. Marcus wondered aloud whether some legacies deserved to survive. Sarah had listened, never mentioning that she'd be serving at Eleanor's birthday party. It seemed irrelevant. She was just staff. She moved through the evening efficiently, offering trays of oysters, replacing empty glasses, wiping down the bar. The guests were the usual Hampton crowd, hedge fund managers, gallery owners, a retired senator, several people famous for being famous. They laughed too loud, drank too much, and treated the serving staff like automated furniture. Around 9 p.m., Sarah noticed Eleanor's mood darkening. The birthday girl was on her 4th martini, her smile growing sharp-edged. Her fiancé, a dissolute trust fund heir named Preston Caldwell, had disappeared with one of the younger guests. Eleanor's father kept pulling her aside for whispered conversations that made her jaw tighten. The pressure was showing. Sarah was refilling the champagne station when she heard Eleanor's voice rise above the music. "Excuse me? Excuse me, is anyone actually working here, or are we paying you people to stand around?" The room didn't quite go silent, but conversations faltered. Sarah felt the shift in atmosphere, that particular tension that preceded something ugly. She kept her face neutral, her movement steady. She'd weathered worse than drunk rich women having bad nights. But as she lifted a fresh bottle of Dom Perignon and turned toward the main room, she caught Eleanor's eyes. There was something in that gaze, a desperate, cruel hunger for a target, for someone to absorb the rage that had nowhere else to go. Sarah's instincts whispered, "Leave, walk away, call in sick." But she had 2 more hours on her shift, and she needed this job for reasons that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with staying grounded in the world most people lived in. She took a breath and stepped forward into the light of the chandeliers.
The first glass of wine hit the marble floor at 9:47 p.m. Sarah had been circling the room with a tray of champagne when a guest backed into her without looking. The collision was gentle, but 3 glasses tumbled, shattering in a crystalline explosion that momentarily stopped the conversation. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said immediately, already kneeling to collect the larger shards. Standard protocol. Apologize, clean quickly, disappear. "Oh, for God's sake!" Eleanor's voice cut through the resumed chatter. She was suddenly there, towering over Sarah in her Valentino gown, her face flushed with alcohol and something darker. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The incompetence is unbelievable." Sarah kept her eyes down, gathering broken glass into a cloth napkin. "It was an accident, ma'am. I'll have this cleaned up in just—" "An accident?" Eleanor's laugh was ugly. "You people always have excuses. Do you have any idea how much those glasses cost? Baccarat crystal, $400 each." Sarah's hand paused for just a moment. "You people." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I apologize," Sarah repeated, her voice carefully even. "Premier Catering will of course cover any—" "Premier Catering charges me, you idiot, which means you just cost me $1,200. Eleanor swayed slightly, her martini sloshing. "What's your name?" Sarah stood slowly, the napkin full of glass shards cupped carefully in her hands. She could feel the room's attention now, guests trying to pretend they weren't watching while absolutely watching. "Sarah, ma'am." "Sarah." Eleanor tested the name like it tasted bad. "Well, Sarah, maybe if you spent less time standing around gossiping with the other help and more time actually doing your job, we wouldn't have these problems." Sarah's supervisor, Michael, a kind man in his 50s who'd worked every society event in New York for decades, appeared at her elbow. "Miss Whitmore, I assure you this was completely accidental. Sarah is one of our most professional— I don't care about her resume. I care that she's ruining my party." Sarah remained still, her face a careful mask. She'd trained herself for these moments, the casual cruelty, the reflexive degradation. Usually it came in smaller doses, being ignored, having people snap fingers instead of using her name, the way some guests would simply put their empty glasses in her hand without breaking conversation, as if she were a mobile trash receptacle. This was different. This had an audience and a purpose. Eleanor needed someone to hurt. "It's fine," Sarah said quietly. "I'll get a broom and—" "You'll get nothing," Eleanor interrupted. "You'll stand there and listen. Do you know who I am?" Here it comes, Sarah thought, the inevitable question that always preceded the worst behavior. "Yes, ma'am. You're Miss Whitmore. This is your home." "This is my estate," Eleanor corrected, emboldened by the attention, by the alcohol, by the desperate need to feel powerful when everything in her life was spiraling. "My family built this house in 1887. We've employed hundreds of people like you over the years, and the one thing we've always demanded is excellence, competence, basic intelligence." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed, but no one spoke up. Sarah's heart was pounding, but her face remained serene. She'd trained herself for these moments, the casual cruelty, the reflexive degradation. Usually it came in smaller doses, being ignored, having people snap fingers instead of using her name, the way some guests would simply put their empty glasses in her hand without breaking conversation, as if she were a mobile trash receptacle. This was different. This had an audience and a purpose. Eleanor needed someone to hurt. "It's fine," Sarah said quietly. "I'll get a broom and—" "You'll get nothing," Eleanor interrupted. "You'll stand there and listen. Do you know who I am?" Here it comes, Sarah thought. the inevitable question that always preceded the worst behavior. "Yes, ma'am, you're Miss Whitmore. This is your home." "This is my estate," Eleanor corrected, emboldened by the attention, by the alcohol, by the desperate need to feel powerful when everything in her life was spiraling. "My family built this house in 1887. We've employed hundreds of people like you over the years, and the one thing we've always demanded is excellence, competence, basic intelligence." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed, but no one spoke up. Sarah's heart was pounding, but her face remained serene. She'd trained herself for these moments, the casual cruelty, the reflexive degradation. Usually it came in smaller doses, being ignored, having people snap fingers instead of using her name, the way some guests would simply put their empty glasses in her hand without breaking conversation, as if she were a mobile trash receptacle. This was different. This had an audience and a purpose. Eleanor needed someone to hurt. "It's fine," Sarah said quietly. "I'll get a broom and—" "You'll get nothing," Eleanor interrupted. "You'll stand there and listen. Do you know who I am?" Eleanor took a long drink, her eyes glittering with mean satisfaction. "You know what I think? I think Premier Catering is scraping the bottom of the barrel these days. I mean, look at you." Her eyes traveled deliberately down Sarah's uniform. "Did they even train you? Did they teach you how to serve properly, or did they just throw an apron on you and hope for the best?" Michael stepped forward. "Miss Whitmore, I really must insist." "You must insist on nothing." Eleanor wheeled on him. "This is my house, my party, and I will not be disrespected by incompetent staff who—" She gestured violently with her martini glass, and the momentum carried her forward. She stumbled, her heel catching on the hem of her gown, and she fell directly into Sarah. The collision was hard. Eleanor's drink splashed across Sarah's uniform. The older woman's weight knocked Sarah backward into the champagne station. More glasses fell, and then Eleanor's hand, whether to catch herself or in pure malicious instinct, grabbed the front of Sarah's uniform and pulled. The sound of fabric ripping was obscenely loud. Sarah felt the white apron tear away completely. The buttons on her black server's dress popped free, the shoulder seam gave with a horrible rending sound, and suddenly the bodice was hanging open, exposing her bra and shoulder. For one terrible, crystalline moment, Sarah stood there, half-dressed, wine-stained, surrounded by broken glass, while 50 of New York's wealthiest people stared. Eleanor recovered first, scrambling backwards. "Look what you did!" she shrieked. "You attacked me! You—" She voice was rising toward hysteria, whether from genuine shock or calculated performance. Sarah couldn't tell. Sarah's hands moved automatically to hold the torn fabric together, but it was useless. The dress was destroyed. "I didn't—" Sarah started, her voice shaking for the first time. "Get out!" Eleanor screamed. "Get out of my house! Michael, I want her fired. I want her gone. I want her banned from every catering company in New York. Do you hear me? She assaulted me." The room erupted in murmurs. People were pulling out phones. I could see the camera flashes, hear the whispers. "This is it," she thought with terrible clarity. "This is the story they'll tell." She looked around the room, meeting eyes one by one. A few people looked away, ashamed. Most just stared, already composing their social media posts. Not one person spoke in her defense. "Sarah, let's go," Michael said gently, his hand on her elbow. His eyes were furious, but his voice was kind. "Come on, let me get you out of here." Sarah let herself be led toward the service entrance, clutching her torn uniform, her dignity in tatters. Behind her, she could hear Eleanor's voice, louder now, telling the story that would become the official version. She came at me. She was hostile. She was incompetent and aggressive and— As Sarah reached the doorway, she glanced back one final time. Eleanor stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by concerned guests, playing the victim with Oscar-worthy commitment. But her eyes, when they met Sarah's for that last second, were cold and satisfied. She'd gotten what she needed, a target, a release, a black woman humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. Sarah turned away, and walked out into the service corridor, her hands still clutching the torn uniform, her dignity in tatters. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Deal's done. Flying home early. Can't wait to see you. Love you." Sarah closed her eyes. Oh, God!
Marcus Chen arrived at their Manhattan apartment at 11:30 p.m., earlier than expected, his mind already composing the email that would finalize the Whitmore contract. He found Sarah in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub in sweatpants and his old MIT t-shirt, staring at nothing. "Hey," he said softly, instantly alert. "What happened?" She looked up at him, and he saw it. The hollow exhaustion, a particular wound that comes from being made small in public. "Sarah!" He knelt in front of her. "Talk to me." It came out in fragments. The party, the glass, Eleanor's escalating cruelty, the torn dress, the accusation, the phones filming as she walked out in humiliation, half-dressed and desperate to disappear. Marcus listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, he was very still. "Show me the dress," he said quietly. She retrieved it from the trash, torn, wine-stained, ruined. Marcus held it up, examining the ripped seams, the missing buttons. His hands were steady, but Sarah knew him well enough to recognize the fury in his control. "I have Michael's number," Sarah said. "He witnessed everything. He said Eleanor grabbed me, that it wasn't—" "I believe you. I don't need witnesses to believe you." He set the dress down carefully. "Did anyone at that party defend you?" Sarah shook her head. "Did anyone tell Eleanor to stop?" "No." "Did anyone, any single person, treat you like a human being deserving of dignity?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. Marcus stood and pulled out his phone. His thumbs moved across the screen with decisive speed. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "Sending an email." "Marcus!" "To Richard Whitmore, canceling the deal." "No!" Sarah stood it abruptly. "No, Marcus, you can't. That deal is worth $1.2 billion. I know exactly what it's worth." He hit send and pocketed his phone. "I also know what my wife is worth, and it's more than that. You've been working on this for 8 months. Your investors are counting on it. You're bored." "Will understand." Marcus took her hands. "Sarah, listen to me. That company, that family, they built their fortune on the backs of enslaved people. They've spent a century and a half exploiting everyone they consider beneath them. Tonight, they added you to that list." His voice dropped to something hard and absolute. "I won't reward that. I won't legitimize it by doing business with them. I won't let them profit while my wife carries the memory of being degraded in their house." "It's too much," Sarah whispered. "It's too big a price for what? For your dignity? There is no price too big for that." He pulled her close. "You think I don't know why you kept taking these catering jobs? Why you insisted on working when you don't financially need to?" Sarah was crying now. "I wanted to stay connected to real life, to remember what most people deal with every day. I didn't want to lose touch." "I know, and I love you for it. But you don't have to sacrifice yourself to stay humble. You don't have to endure abuse to remain empathetic." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "What Eleanor did tonight, what all those people did by staying silent, that's not a lesson you needed to learn. That's a lesson they need to learn." "They'll never learn it," Sarah said bitterly. "People like that never do." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed, "but they'll feel it. When their company collapses, when the banks come calling, when they realize that the bridge they burned tonight was the only thing standing between them and bankruptcy." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Sometimes consequences are the only teacher that works. His phone began ringing immediately, Richard Whitmore's number flashing on the screen. Marcus declined the call. It rang again. He declined again. "There will be fallout," Sarah warned. "Business fallout, social fallout. They'll tell their version of tonight. They'll make me the villain."
"Let them try," Marcus said. "I have Michael's statement. I have a torn dress. I have a timeline. And I have something they don't. Credibility. People know I don't make impulsive decisions. When I tell them why I walked away from a billion-dollar deal, they'll listen." The phone rang a third time, then a fourth. Text messages began flooding in, from Richard, from the Whitmore Group's lawyers, from business associates, wondering what had happened. Marcus turned his phone off completely. "Tonight," he said, "we sleep. Tomorrow, we decide how loud we want to be about this. But Sarah," he waited until she met his eyes, "I need you to hear me. You did nothing wrong. You survived something cruel with grace, and I am so fucking proud of you." Sarah collapsed against him, finally letting herself feel everything she had been holding back. Outside their window, New York glittered with indifferent beauty, a city built on ambition, cruelty, and occasional justice. Tomorrow the Whitmores would wake up to ruin. Tonight Sarah Chen was held by someone who loved her enough to burn $1 billion rather than let her pain go unanswered.
The story broke at 6 a.m., not through traditional media, but through Marcus's X account, a single thread that would be screenshot, shared, and dissected millions of times before noon. "Last night, my wife worked a catering shift at a private party in the Hamptons. She wore a professional uniform, did her job with dignity, and was verbally abused, physically grabbed, and had her clothing torn by the host in front of 50-plus guests. Not one person intervened. I was finalizing a $1.2 billion deal with that host's company. That deal is now canceled. Here's why." The thread continued for 22 posts, methodical and devastating. Marcus didn't name Eleanor initially. He didn't have to. The details were specific enough that within an hour, social media had identified the party, the location, and the Whitmore family. By 8 a.m., 3 guests had leaked photos and videos. By 9 a.m., Michael had released a formal statement corroborating everything. By 10 a.m., the Whitmore Group's stock had plummeted 34%. Eleanor's response was predictable. A defensive Instagram post claiming she'd been defending herself from an aggressive staff member, followed by a threat of legal action. It made everything worse. The video showed clearly who had grabbed whom, who had torn the dress, who had escalated the situation. Preston Caldwell, Eleanor's fiancé, ended their engagement by noon. Not out of moral outrage, but because he could read a balance sheet. The Whitmore name was toxic now, and he wanted distance. Richard Whitmore issued a formal apology by 2 p.m., offering Sarah a settlement of $2 million to resolve this unfortunate incident. Marcus's response was public and immediate. "My wife's dignity is not for sale. Your apology is noted and insufficient." But the real shift happened more quietly. The story resonated because it crystallized something millions of people had experienced but rarely saw acknowledged at the scale. The casual cruelty that thrives in spaces of wealth and power, the way certain people treat service workers as subhuman, the complicity of silence when someone is being degraded. Sarah's phone filled with messages from other workers, retail employees humiliated by customers, nannies mistreated by wealthy parents, healthcare workers abused by patients who saw them as servants rather than professionals. The story wasn't just about one woman at one party. It was about a system that allowed this behavior to flourish unchallenged. 3 days after the incident, Sarah agreed to one interview, a long-form piece with a journalist known for nuanced reporting on race and class. She was careful, measured, refusing to make it entirely about racism, even though that undercurrent was undeniable. "What hurt most," she said in the interview, "wasn't the torn dress or even the words, it was the silence. 50 people watched me be humiliated, and not one found the courage to say, 'This is wrong.' That's the real story. Not Eleanor's cruelty, but everyone else's comfort with it." The piece ran with the headline, "The $1 billion Cost of Silence." Within a week,
Premier Catering had implemented new protections for workers at high-end events, including a policy that allowed staff to immediately leave situations where they felt unsafe or disrespected with full pay. 3 other major catering companies followed suit. It was a small change, but significant. The Whitmore Group filed for bankruptcy 6 weeks later. The company was carved up and sold to competitors. Eleanor retreated from public life, last seen at a wellness retreat in Bali, posting vague inspirational quotes about growth through adversity. Marcus's company absorbed the loss of the Whitmore deal and moved forward. His board supported the decision unanimously. His investors, surprisingly, saw it as a demonstration of ethical leadership, the kind that made long-term business sense, even when it carried short-term costs. But the real resolution wasn't about money or corporate outcomes. 3 months after that night, Sarah returned to Premier Catering, not because she needed the work, but because she refused to let that experience take something she valued away from her. She worked one more event, a small gallery opening, where guests treated her with respect, and several recognized her and thanked her for speaking out. When she got home that night, she found Marcus in the kitchen making dinner. Pasta with garlic and olive oil, her favorite. "How was it?" he asked. "Fine," she said. "Good, actually." "You didn't have to go back," he said gently. "I know. But I wanted to prove something to myself. That I could walk into that world again and not carry shame. That what happened wasn't about my worth. It was about Eleanor's character." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "I'm proud of you." "I know. I'm proud of me too."